In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, there is a specific moment that the modern church has tried to soften for 2,000 years. It happens immediately after an exorcism. The text describes a boy possessed by a spirit so violent that the disciples were powerless to stop it. They tried to remove it. They used their prayers. They used their authority. And they failed completely. They stood trembling in the presence of an entity they could not comprehend and could not control. Then Jesus steps forward. He commands the spirit to leave. The boy falls as if dead and then rises. The chaos ends. The silence returns. But it is what happens next that holds the key to the war we are fighting today. The disciples are shaken. They are confused. They ask him privately why they could not cast it out. And Jesus turns to them and gives an instruction that sounds like a metaphor but is actually a weapon. He looks at them and says simply, "Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with one another." For centuries, theologians have argued about this line. They tell you it is poetry. They tell you it is symbolic. They say salt represents wisdom, or the flavor of faith, or the preservation of the covenant. They have spent lifetimes turning a tactical instruction into a harmless Sunday sermon. But the Gnostics, who preserved the original teachings, knew better. They knew he was not speaking in metaphors. He was not giving spiritual advice. He was giving them physical protection protocol. He was handing them the codes to spiritual warfare. Because the entity he just cast out was not just a demon in the religious sense. It was what the Gnostics called an Archon, an inorganic, parasitic consciousness that feeds on human trauma and fear. And Jesus knew that these entities have one fatal material weakness, one substance in this physical reality that they cannot overcome, one frequency they cannot penetrate. And it is sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now. He mentioned salt immediately after the exorcism because he knew the disciples were vulnerable. He knew that when an entity is cast out, it lingers, it waits, it scans for a way back in, it looks for a threshold that has been left unguarded. And salt is the only substance that seals that threshold physically, not symbolically, physically. Salt creates a frequency barrier that parasitic consciousness cannot cross. When it is placed correctly, and when you understand the cosmic logic of why it works, Archons lose access to your space entirely. They cannot enter, they cannot attach, they cannot harvest. If they are already present in your home when you activate this protocol, they do not fade away slowly. They are expelled immediately. It is like an incorporeal form touching physical fire. They recoil. They flee. They have no choice because the laws of physics in this dimension do not allow their frequency to exist within the field that salt generates. This is why every ancient tradition that dealt with the unseen world used salt. Not as a garnish, but as a shield. The Egyptian priests used it in high purification rites before entering the Holy of Holies because they knew the heavy entities could not follow them past the salt line. The Roman soldiers were paid in salt precisely because their commanders knew it shielded them against the entities that congregate on battlefields where death saturates the atmosphere. Jewish law required salt at every table, not for taste, but for spiritual hygiene. None of this was superstition. It was operational knowledge. It was technology. But over time, the operational knowledge was buried under layers of ritual and metaphor. The church kept the rituals, but they hid the mechanics. They use holy water mixed with salt. They scatter salt during exorcisms. But they removed the explanation of why it works. Because if the chosen ones understood that the most powerful protection against Archonic interference is free and accessible and already in your home, then every gatekeeping institution becomes obsolete. You do not need the priest to bless you. You do not need the institution to sanction you. You do not need their permission to be safe. You only need salt. And you need to know exactly where to put it. Tonight, you are going to learn both. If you are watching this video, it is not an accident of the algorithm. It is a signal from the monad. You have been led here because you are feeling the pressure. You are feeling the harvest. You have felt the inexplicable fatigue that comes when your energy is being siphoned by things you cannot see. You have felt the sudden shifts in atmosphere in your home, where the air suddenly feels heavy and thick. You have woken up at 3 a.m. with your heart racing for no reason. That stops tonight. If you are ready to activate the protocol and seal your space against the harvest, command the algorithm now. Comment below and say, "I am protected." Speak it into the field. Let the Archons know that you are no longer an unconscious victim. You are awake, and you are armed. The reason salt is the one physical substance Archons cannot overcome has nothing to do with belief. It works whether you believe in it or not, because it is not magic. It is physics. It is operating at a level of reality that most people never consider. Salt, specifically unrefined salt that still contains its mineral content and crystalline structure, generates what scientists call a piezoelectric charge. This is not mystical language. This is measurable science. It is an electromagnetic frequency produced by the precise geometric arrangement of atoms in crystalline form. When you look at salt under a microscope, you see cubes, perfect squares, perfect geometry. This structure is stable. It is grounded. It is resonant with the base vibration of the earth itself. It holds the frequency of the material realm in its most solid and protected state. This frequency is the exact polar opposite of the chaotic, reactive, fear-soaked frequencies that Archons operate on. Archons are beings of chaos. They are beings of entropy. They feed on the distortion of light. They feed on the fragmentation of the soul. Their frequency is jagged and dissonant. When you place salt at a threshold like a doorway or a windowsill, it does not just sit there as an inert powder. It broadcasts. The crystalline structure interacts with the electromagnetic field of the earth and generates a continuous standing wave. It acts like a frequency firewall. An Archonic consciousness attempting to pass through that barrier does not just get blocked. Ancient texts describe the experience for them as burning. Not fire that consumes flesh, but a frequency disruption so severe it threatens to shatter their energetic coherence. It forces an immediate retreat. Because Archons are parasitic frequency, they have no material body to shield them. They exist as patterns of consciousness. They attach to living beings to generate the emotional energy they consume, but they can only attach where the frequency allows penetration. Salt-generated fields do not allow it. Here is what makes this even more powerful. Archons do not just avoid salt barriers. They cannot perceive them clearly. To a parasitic consciousness operating in the lower astral densities, salt creates what looks like blank space. It creates a void in their vision. It is like a wall they cannot see through and cannot see around, so they do not even know what is inside a salt-protected perimeter. You become invisible to their scanning. They move past your home looking for easier targets. They look for the people who do not know this code, the people who have left their thresholds open, the people who are broadcasting harvestable frequencies of fear and desperation without any protection. This is exactly why the teaching was suppressed. Not because it is difficult, not because it requires years of initiation, but because it is too simple. It is too accessible, and it is too effective. Anyone with a box of salt can in 5 minutes activate a level of protection that most priests spend lifetimes claiming only they can provide. The Gnostic texts are explicit about this. The Pistis Sophia, which is one of the deepest and most guarded of the Gnostic books, describes salt as the matter which purifieth all things. It says it creates barriers the Archons cannot pass through nor perceive beyond. The Gospel of Philip mentions salt in the context of sealing thresholds against the powers that devour. This was not symbolic instruction for people living 2,000 years ago. This is operational technology that works the same way right now. Because the Archons have not evolved, they are trapped in their own loop. They are still operating on the same low frequencies. They are still vulnerable to the same disruptions. They are still completely unable to cross a salt barrier. And the moment you activate this protection, you stop being accessible. You stop being a target they can easily harvest from. In a world where most people are walking around completely unprotected, broadcasting their trauma like beacons, you become functionally invisible to the entire parasitic system. Now that you understand the cosmic logic of why it works, we must discuss the ritual of placement. This is not a vague instruction to sprinkle it around and hope for the best. This is precise placement that creates an actual sealed perimeter. Salt protection operates through thresholds. You must understand this word, thresholds. Archons move between dimensions. They exist in the lower astral density, but they access your material space through specific entry points. They cannot walk through walls, but they can flow through the energetic openings that doors and windows create. If you seal those points correctly, they are locked out completely. You begin with your main door, the front entrance. This is the mouth of your home. It is where energy flows in and out most actively. It is where you invite the world in, and it is where the Archons try to follow you in. You are going to create a salt line across the threshold, not inside the door on the rug, not outside on the porch where the wind and rain will dissolve it. You place it directly on the threshold itself, that strip of wood or metal at the base of the doorframe that separates the inside from the outside. Take regular table salt, take sea salt, take pink salt. It does not matter as long as it is salt. Pour a continuous line from one side of the doorframe to the other. It does not need to be a mountain of salt. A 1/4 inch wide is enough, but it must be unbroken. This is the most critical rule. No gaps. A gap in the line is a gap in the frequency field. A gap is an invitation. The line must be solid. Once it is there, that threshold is sealed. Archons attempting to enter will hit that frequency field and they will recoil. Then you move to the windows. Every window in your home is a potential access point. Not because Archons are physical and need to climb through the glass, but because windows are thresholds between the sanctuary of the inside and the chaos of the outside. Consciousness does not need physical openings to penetrate, it needs frequency gaps. So, you are going to place salt on every windowsill. Just a thin line along the interior sill where the window closes. If you have many windows and limited salt, you must prioritize the bedroom. The bedroom is your sanctuary. It is where you leave your body every night to travel in the dream state. It is where you are most vulnerable. Sleep drops your natural defenses. Your conscious awareness dims. Your energy field becomes more permeable. This is when Archonic interference is easiest. This is when the night terrors come. This is when the sleep paralysis strikes. This is when the energy siphon is attached. A salt line on your bedroom windowsill creates a sealed space where they cannot reach you even when you are unconscious. It blinds them to your sleeping form. Then you go to the back door, the side door, any door that leads to the outside. Give them the same treatment, a solid, unbroken salt line on the threshold. And here is something most people miss: the internal thresholds, the basement and the attic. If you have a basement, that is often where the heaviest energy accumulates. It is below ground. It is away from the purifying light of the sun. It tends to collect stagnant frequency. A salt line at the top of the basement stairs keeps anything dwelling down there from coming up into your living space. It acts as a seal over the lower depths. The same applies to the attic access. These are not primary entry points from outside, but they are internal thresholds where trapped energy can leak into your sanctuary. Now, if you want maximum protection, If you are dealing with active Archonic harassment, if you are in a living situation where the energy feels constantly heavy and oppressive, you can create a full perimeter. This means salt lines not just at the thresholds, but at the boundary itself. Some chosen ones place salt in a continuous line around the entire exterior of their home, right at the foundation where the building meets the ground. This creates a sealed field around the whole structure. It creates a fortress. It takes more salt, it takes more effort, but the result is impenetrable. Nothing crosses that boundary. You will feel the difference within hours. The atmosphere inside becomes noticeably clearer. It becomes lighter. It feels like a physical pressure you did not realize was there has suddenly lifted. The air becomes easier to breathe. There is one more critical placement: under your bed. This is not a threshold in the traditional sense, but it is a vulnerability point. The space under your bed is dark. It is enclosed, and it is directly beneath your spine while you sleep. It is a prime location for Archonic presence to anchor while you are unconscious. Placing a small bowl of salt, or even just a pile of salt under the center of your bed, disrupts any attachment attempting to form there. It breaks the link. Some people report that the first night after doing this, they sleep more deeply than they have in years. Because for the first time in their lives, nothing is feeding on their energy while they sleep. Here is what you need to know about maintenance. Salt lines do not last forever. They work through the crystalline frequency broadcast, and over time, especially in high traffic areas, the salt gets disturbed. It gets scattered. It gets depleted as it absorbs the negative ions. So you will want to refresh the lines. Most chosen ones do this weekly, some do it monthly. You will know when it is time. You will feel the heaviness start to return. You will notice the disturbances creeping back in. When that happens, do not just pour new salt over the old. Sweep up the old salt. This is important. That old salt has absorbed the negative frequency. It has taken the hit for you. Do not keep it inside. Dispose of it outside your property. Return it to the earth or flush it away. Then lay the fresh lines. The whole process takes 5 minutes. 5 minutes once a week to maintain a barrier that most people never establish at all. And one final detail that makes this protocol complete. If you are dealing with active attachment right now, if you feel like an Archonic presence is already in your space, if you feel watched, if you feel drained, if the arguments in your home seem to come from nowhere, you do not just place salt at the thresholds. You do a full cleanse first. Walk through every room with salt in your hand. Throw small pinches into the corners. Throw it under the furniture. Throw it anywhere shadows linger. And as you do it, you must speak. Not a prayer, not a request, a declaration. You say, "This space is sealed. Parasitic consciousness is expelled. Only what resonates with the source remains." The salt disrupts their frequency. The declaration reinforces your authority. The monad acts through your voice. Within minutes, the atmosphere shifts. What was oppressive becomes breathable. What was chaotic becomes still. And then you place the threshold lines to keep it that way. If salt protection is this simple and this effective, why did it take you until tonight to learn about it? Why was this not taught in Sunday school? Why was this not on the news? Because the people who gatekeep spiritual power do not benefit from you having direct access to protection. The church kept the knowledge while removing the explanation. They still use salt. They still bless it. But they position themselves as the intermediaries. You need the priest to bless it. You need the ritual performed by the ordained authority. That is how dependency is manufactured. That is how they keep the flock dependent on the shepherd. If you can activate protection yourself with something that costs $3 and takes 5 minutes, you do not need their services. You do not need their hierarchy. You do not need to petition them for what you already have access to. The Gnostics taught direct access, no intermediaries, no gatekeeping, just technique and knowledge. And that is exactly why their texts were buried. That is why their communities were destroyed. That is why their teachings were branded as heresy. Not because they were wrong, but because they were too effective at creating spiritual autonomy.
When the chosen ones know how to protect themselves, institutions claiming to offer protection lose their leverage. When you seal your space with salt, you are not showing up to services begging for cleansing. You are already clean. When you know that the Archons fear this one substance and you have unlimited access to it, you stop being controllable through the fear of spiritual attack. Jesus taught this to the chosen ones specifically. He did not teach it to the crowds. He taught it in private instruction to the people he knew would carry the code forward. And for a while, they did. Early Gnostic communities practiced salt protection as standard protocol. Every home had sealed thresholds. Every gathering space was protected. And the result was a level of spiritual clarity and freedom that threatened the emerging religious power structure. So the teaching got suppressed. Gradually, at first. Then, systematically. Books were burned, teachers were silenced, communities were scattered, until all that remained was the diluted version. Salt as a metaphor, salt as a symbol, salt as something meaningless unless blessed by an approved authority. But knowledge this practical does not die. It goes underground. It waits in the ether, and it surfaces again when the chosen ones are ready to receive it. You are watching this video because some part of you recognized the truth before I even explained it. You already knew salt mattered. You felt it in your bones. You just did not know why. You just did not know how. And now you do. The Archons cannot put that knowledge back in the box. The veil has been lifted. The moment you place those salt lines tonight, you will feel the shift. And once you have felt what protection actually does, how different your space becomes when it is sealed, you can never go back to living exposed. You will not forget this. You will not dismiss this. Here is what to expect in the hours and days after you place salt at your thresholds. First, if there was an Archonic presence already in your space, you might experience a brief intensification before it clears. This is not the salt failing. This is the entities reacting. They are being forced out. They are losing their food source. They will try to create one last surge of fear or anger or chaos to feed before they lose access. You might feel sudden anxiety. You might have intrusive thoughts. You might feel physical tension in your chest or stomach. Do not interpret this as an attack. Interpret it as confirmation. Interpret it as victory. They are leaving. This usually lasts 30 minutes to an hour, and then it is gone. And what replaces it is silence. The kind of silence you forgot was possible. Most people report that the first night sleeping in a protected space is different. Dreams become clearer. They become less chaotic. Some chosen ones say they stop having nightmares entirely. Others notice they wake up actually rested instead of feeling drained, despite sleeping 8 hours. That is because nothing is feeding on you while you are unconscious. Your energy field gets to regenerate instead of being siphoned, and over time, that compounds. After a week of protected sleep, you have more vitality. After a month, you notice you are not getting triggered as easily. The things that used to send you into spirals of anger or despair do not land the same way. That is not just personal growth. That is protection creating space for your natural state to stabilize. You will also notice a shift in who shows up in your life. People who were energetically draining. Friends who only contacted you when they needed something. Family members who always left you feeling depleted. They start losing interest in you. Not because you changed toward them, but because you are no longer broadcasting the frequency they were unconsciously feeding on. This can feel like loss at first, but what it actually is
is clarification. It is pruning. The relationships that remain after you activate protection are the ones based on genuine connection, not parasitic exchange. And often new people start appearing, other chosen ones. People who recognize something in you that was not visible before because it was buried under Archonic interference. The other thing that happens, and this is the part that proves the technique is working, is that synchronicities increase. Solutions to problems appear without you forcing them. Information you need shows up exactly when you need it. Obstacles that felt insurmountable suddenly dissolve. This is not magic. This is what happens when you stop being energetically drained. Your natural connection to the monad becomes clearer. Your connection to source becomes unobstructed. And when that connection is clear, reality responds differently, not because reality changed, but because you are finally operating from the frequency you were always meant to inhabit. The frequency the Archons spend all their effort trying to keep you away from. Jesus taught the chosen ones that the one object Archons fear most is salt. Not blessed by priests, not charged with rituals, just salt. Because salt generates a crystalline frequency that parasitic consciousness cannot cross. Place it at your thresholds. Front door, back door, windows, bedroom especially. Create a sealed perimeter they cannot penetrate. Place it under your bed and protect yourself during sleep when you are most vulnerable. Do a full cleanse by throwing salt in corners and shadowed spaces while declaring your authority. This is operational spiritual warfare technology that costs almost nothing and works immediately. Suppressed knowledge does not die. It goes underground and resurfaces when the chosen ones are ready to stop being harvested. And you are ready. Tonight, before you sleep, you are going to place the salt. A line across your front door threshold. A line on your bedroom windowsill. If you want maximum protection, hit every door and window in your home. If you are dealing with active interference, do the full cleanse. Within an hour, you will feel the shift. The heaviness will lift, the atmosphere will clear. And for the first time in maybe years, you will sleep in a space that is actually sealed against the entities that have been feeding on you without your conscious awareness. That is not comfort. That is warfare. And it starts the moment you activate what is already in your home. If you are placing salt tonight, do 3 things right now. First, comment below, "I am protected." Commit to sealing every threshold in your home. Speak it into existence so the field can hear you. Second, subscribe to this channel. The advanced Archon defense protocols are coming, and you do not want to miss the next code. Third, share this video. Send it to the one person you know who is suffering, the one person who is drained. Help other chosen ones discover the one object that has been sitting in their kitchen this whole time. Do all 3 now. Then go to your kitchen, grab your salt, and start with your front door. Pour that line across the threshold, seal it, and feel what happens when the Archons lose access to you forever. They fear salt because salt works. And once you activate it, you are not accessible anymore. You are not harvestable. You are protected. And that protection is as permanent as you choose to make it. The Archons cannot stop you from doing this. They can only hope you never find out it works. And you just found out.